science in general, in fact, is not great at explaining the concepts and what we're doing to people who are outside of the field you're in, especially if it's technical, if it's not technical. We're just not, seriously, we haven't been we love creating content for other techies, for instance, we love that, but especially when it comes to something like artificial intelligence where, the hints in the name, people read that and say, oh, artificial intelligence, why? It's like a person? It's like, it's like immediately they're, in their minds, it's like, I get that, your medical exam's a good one. If you're not a medical, neurologist, I've got no idea exactly what they do when they, whereas you tell me it's artificial intelligence. I know what intelligence is. I can imagine that. So the danger is that people can imagine, make up what they think it's going to be. And if we haven't done a good enough job at explaining, well, someone gave it that label, but actually let's define what we really mean by that. But the trouble is, after 5 minutes of, people have switched off, and so we have to find ways of actually explaining what it is and isn't. And as you say, the journey it's on, what it could be, 5 years. And we've got to find ways of explaining that in ways that the non-technologists, the non-AI folks will understand. Otherwise, we'll end up with, at best case, just, mismatched expectations. Worst case, real disaster when, people get to trust it, think they can trust it for something that they really can't.
My guest is a serial deep tech entrepreneur, Henry Nash, who's been involved in deep tech since 1986 to achieve what he describes as the near impossible. He's one of the pioneers of immersive 3D VR chat rooms 25 years before Meta, and he was even featured by Bill Gates in Microsoft's Professional Developers Conference in 1996.
And I'd like to ask Henry Nash, who's the head of the company, to come up and show us some of the progress they've made in not only creating a visual way of letting people get together, but also now bringing audio into the experience.
He has also pioneered horizontally scalable distributed infrastructure 10 years before the cloud, and some of his businesses won multiple awards, including the Queen's Award for Technology. He's also an author of one of my favorite books, Letters to Dead People, which is a fun take on history.
Traditional model is like a precision screwdriver, but this is like a general purpose model. It can do everything, not perhaps as well as the original one, but pretty good. Where this falls down, of course, once I bought this, it doesn't cost me anything to use it. And that isn't the case with AI. It does cost me every time I use it. And as I said, the bigger the model, the more it costs me to use every time. So I agree, what is the ROI and is that a reasonable thing? What is the thing you're replacing or augmenting or accelerating or getting new business, whatever it happens to be? It can't just be for the sake of it. It has to be achieving something. We talk a lot about hard skills and soft skills when we talk about people, what their capabilities are. And usually, and we don't say this, but often people mean hard skills. We've got to have those. It'd be nice if you had some soft skills as well. We don't usually say that, but usually that's what people mean when they talk about that. Well, actually, if you think about it, AI is going to be very good at a lot of the hard skills and much less good at the soft skills. There are people who argue with that statement and say, AI can be empathetic and all that, but certainly to start with, it's the hard skills that AI will end up doing. I want to code in C++, or I want to be able to, understand legal, blah, 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 what happens to be. So I think from thinking about individuals going forward, both your own development and how you should think about what your skills are, actually soft skills are going to become increasingly important compared with what you think your hard skills are. There are certain problems which are very, very hard to solve on a classical computer, which quantum computing should be able to solve and will be able to solve. No question about it, will be able to solve. Today, we're just to the point when you can start showing that stuff, that you can actually do these things, and pretty soon they will outperform the classical computers. We're literally on the cusp of that right now. For various problems that are amenable to the sorts of programming that you have with quantum computing. just having a farm of them individually doesn't necessarily help you very much. What is actually particularly mind-blowing, we'll dive into a little bit of science here, is that the way quantum computers work is that...
This is a CEO Retort podcast, the show that fearlessly goes after the difficult topics that we all need to talk about, campaigns for issues that we're all concerned about, and invites some amazing, inspiring, and remarkable guests who will help us navigate through this fragile world that we all care about. I'm Tim Al-Sheikh. Let's get after it.
You are listening to CEO Retort.
Yeah. Just for legal reasons, I have to say that you're not here officially representing IBM, but I know you're very outspoken anyway, so I'll let you say whatever you want to say and whatever you can say legally. Right. So I'm not going to be pushing anything. But one of the reasons, in fact, why I did want to bring you on board, apart from the fact that you and I have been having conversations, definitely about AI for quite a few years now, but I'm particularly interested, sort of in IBM's approach with AI and generative AI, because we obviously, I mean, the way you and I met, we kind of building a relationship with IBM in the same way that we've done with other companies for my company. And I'm just surprised that IBM just is not in the conversation at all. Like, it's all about the OpenAIs, the usual suspects, right? OpenAI, Google, et cetera, et cetera. But for some reason, IBM is not, it's hardly, I mean, very rarely I see IBM being mentioned, despite the fact, at least in my opinion, I think IBM is doing some really great jobs when it comes to ethics and responsible AI. I mean, I would argue, IBM is the first company that actually went head first into the ethical AI and responsible AI before anyone else. Yeah. And I'm just wondering what's going on here.
And I think, it's a fair observation, I think, actually. And, it's partly by design, but partly by circumstance, if you like. IBM have been doing AI for decades, obviously, as you know, before generative AI kind of furor, broke out. We're not trying to compete with ChatGPT. I mean, that's not what we're trying to do. IBM, if you think about it, and what large enterprises should be doing, in my opinion, is what is it that their clients are going to need to capitalize on some of the good things that generative AI and modern AI can do. And for IBM, that means, we have typically large clients, and they're interested in, okay, how can I be more efficient with my workforce? How can I ensure that if I use AI, that it's trusted and that it's built off the right set of data, that is relevant to my industry. IBM's not trying to help people write their essays or, make pictures of the Pope in a puffer jacket or whatever it happens to be, the latest, fancy thing that AI can do. That's just not what we've been trying to do. We've been working on it, obviously, in the background. And, to their credit, IBM, obviously has one of the largest funded research groups in the world. And we've continued to do that. And they've been very active. They were the people who came out with, the original Watson stuff, Jeopardy and all that kind of thing. And then obviously the new Watson X stuff is what's come out of there, the kind of next generation, if you like, of that. That's all the generative AI capabilities and the foundation models. But it's really a matter of focus. And we're in the business of making our clients successful, full stop, and whatever it takes to do that is what we're going to do. And what our clients tell us when we talk to them is, help us take this technology, embed it inside our enterprises. And that doesn't mean necessarily, fancy chat interfaces. It means, imbue AI into our ordering process or our HR process or our, or development cycles, like coding cycles, for instance. And so IBM's products are very much focused on, not so much domain as in financial versus aerospace, but it's more in terms of, capability to, provide digital labor, in certain circumstances, capabilities to augment, accelerate development coding. So they're more targeted, if you like. And I guess that's maybe less spicy than going after some, huge thing that, that will get the headlines in every, public press on the planet. And so it's really by design, because that's the market we're trying to serve. And so we're taking all that expertise and focusing, on those things very specifically, which I think, which maybe doesn't mean we turn up less in the, the big AI kind of comparisons. But if you talk to clients about what are they actually implementing, then we turn up a hell of a lot. That's not a press, because most of the clients aren't going to release that in the press.
Yeah, no, because this is, again, part of the conversations that we had a lot. It's like how the companies that we work with, they don't care about the hype. They don't really care about, I'm not interested in using AI to create, pictures and stuff. We're not interested in that at all. To them, like you said, it's really about solving problems that's relevant to their business and relevant to their customers.
Yeah.
But also there's a major trust issue, because effectively, if they are to outsource processes to an AI system, if it breaks apart or it starts hallucinating, for example, then that's their reputation, from their customer's perspective. And then, of course, it could be catastrophic.
Yeah. I think the other aspect of that, I think, is most people have got very excited about, look at these capabilities that we can demonstrate, that we couldn't do before in whatever field it happens to be. And that's really, that's really interesting in terms of a direction of capability. If you want to put it into production and rely on it, then there's a whole different ball game of stuff you've got to do, which is, not only, so at some point audit are going to come and call and ask you how was this all done? And how, and so, can you show, okay, these are the steps we did in terms of building our model, tuning it, or what it happened to be. These are the data sets that were curated to build it. This is how we're monitoring it on a week by week, month by month basis in production, as potentially the inputs change, because, especially if it's exposed to the outside world, who knows what inputs been put in, and does the output, whether that's responses or actions, is it within the framework that you set out in terms of what you considered reliable? Not just kind of profanity and hallucination, but it's like, are the answers more or less, what's the accuracy like? Does that drift over time? And although perhaps foundation models, if the input is the same, foundation models perhaps drift less, but the input's obviously often not controlled, and you built it with some set of input you thought you were going to feed to your models, and over time that changes as environments change. And that whole production from life cycle, really, from creation to running production and most likely to be superseded by something, because obviously the technology is changing so fast. How you manage that is totally different, and we're spending a lot of time on that, because obviously, to my earlier point, if you want to use it in production in an enterprise, you've got to get that bit right. Because otherwise, I agree. Otherwise, you'll get sued or we've already seen a number of embarrassing things where people just got to withdraw stuff because it's just not, they put in production, didn't do what they thought it was going to do after a while, and they've had to, take it down. We've seen, we've all seen a number of those, which are not great reputational stories.
Even recently, even with IBM's reliable models, I think, was it with McDonald's that things even didn't work
McDonald's,
out? And that's despite
the ordering thing. Yeah, it was like, okay.
So it's like, even with reliable models,
exactly.
That's the argument. Like I've been making. I started doing this a lot on this channel as well. But for years, that I've been telling people that there's a huge difference between AI models working in a controlled sort of experimental environment and the real world. The real world is unpredictable, and AI generally, certainly from my experience, obviously, one of the things I like to do with all the guests is like, I want to go through, your life story that led you to where you are today, because it actually plays a big role with the job that you're doing with IBM right now. So we definitely got to get back to that. But generally speaking, from my experience, AI struggles in unpredictable environments. That's why I always chuckle. And I have to say, I'm guilty of that. I used to be the same tech entrepreneur that likes to push the hype and all of that stuff in terms of, our AI models are like 99.7% accurate or whatever. Yeah, in a control environment, yes. You take it out of that into the real world, it's more like, 10%. I mean, maybe you could probably disagree with me if you want, but maybe I would say if I'm generous, maximum 50% accurate, which is not good, actually.
Yeah, and there's several things to that. That is a real danger. Which again, first of all, it depends on the aperture of exposure, if you like. One way you get around that problem is you do constrain the aperture because you're right. If it's open season, if you like, then there are the complexities. And so back to, again, my earlier comments, one of the reasons we're focusing on more tightly controlled, if you like, apertures because for that reason is that then you can provide more accuracy for the tasks at hand. The other thing is a general point is that if you look at the software development in general, it's littered with cases of, well, it never did that before in the lab. Nothing to do with AI. Look, just think of it time after time. Partly because, most softwares, traditionally software wasn't developed with a good diverse, team, so that there was groupthink that, it's going to be this way. Bad actors weren't considered outside of the rep, and so when it goes, into the Wild West, then, you just didn't predict that breadth of input, if you like. And so I agree, just like any other software things, the AI solutions have got that problem. Though I think it's exasperate is the wrong word, but it's heightened, I think, because of the type of thing that we're trying to achieve with AI in terms of, it's trying to, be a digital person, if you like, in some cases.
Well, AGI, basically.
Yeah, so
whatever the terms people use these days.
We have, imagine, in our brains, we imagine what that thing should do. And then suddenly the danger is we trust it too much if the aperture is too broad, and then we get very disappointed with the results. And I think those are some of the, the McDonald one, sadly, is quite a good example of that, where, just somehow, they didn't consider, in my opinion, the breadth of the aperture that people could fit into that. And, what it was, hundreds and hundreds of different orders of whatever it was got added to various things, and so.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the reasons why, I thought I wanted to launch a podcast to educate the market, because frankly, why should they know? It's not their job. It's like if you're not medically trained, right? So why should you know what a doctor might see as the obvious problem? If you're not a trained individual, you wouldn't know what the obvious problem is. It's not your job. And I think this is where I think the tech sector kind of failed the general public and the business community in a major way, because effectively they're pushing out the hype without necessarily being honest. Because AI is a journey, as you know, right? It's not a product. It's not something that it's not like building a website or an app or something you just download and plug it into something and let's say magic AI just works out of nothing. No, it's a journey that requires pretty complicated, like you said earlier, processes and auditing, and the list goes on and on and on. And of course, yes, it's tedious. Yes, it's expensive, but when it works, oh my God, it's amazing. It's truly phenomenal stuff.
Exactly. And I think, the uncomfortable truth is that as technologists, we've always struggled and not been very good at explaining. And I explore that science in general, in fact, is not great at explaining the concepts and what we're doing to people who are outside of the field you're in, especially if it's technical versus not technical. We're just not, seriously, we haven't been we love creating content for other techies, for instance, we love that, but especially when it comes to something like artificial intelligence where, the hints in the name, people read that and say, oh, artificial intelligence. Well, it's like a person. It's like, it's like immediately they're, in their minds, it's like, I get that. Your medical exam's a good one. If you're not a medical, neurologist, I've got no idea exactly what they do when they, whereas you tell me it's artificial intelligence. I know what intelligence is. I can imagine that. So the danger is that people can imagine and make up what they think it's going to be. And if we haven't done a good enough job at explaining, well, someone gave it that label, but actually let's define what we really mean by that. But the trouble is, after 5 minutes of, people have switched off, and so we have to find ways of actually explaining what it is and isn't. And as you say, the journey it's on, what it could be, 5 years. And we've got to find ways of explaining that in ways that the non-technologists, the non-AI folks will understand. Otherwise, we'll end up with, at best case, just, mismatched, expectations. Worst case, real disaster when, people get to trust it, think they can trust it for something that they really can't. So.
Yeah. And I guess this is where the hype comes in, which I think probably leads me very nicely to talk about your background as a serial tech entrepreneur. A lot of people say that term, but you are literally a serial tech entrepreneur that you've been at it for quite a long time. I mean, I always tell people, I've been around, like I started as this like late 90s entrepreneur, 20 years, but actually this is nothing compared to you. So that's why.
Yeah. I did have a normal job for 3 years, I think, after university. Maybe 4 years.
I think 1 year. I think I worked. But then, actually, I worked for 2 years max as a biomedical scientist, and I only did it because I had to qualify, because it's a medical field. So you get your degree, but then you had to work in the actual hospital and stuff to get the qualification. And then that was it. I was out. As soon as I got it, I was like, okay, I'm out. Straight into the business world. Now, but like tell us the story, because you've been involved in the world of tech pretty much sort of in the early days of Silicon Valley, which is seems like a different world, doesn't it?
So founded the first startup in 1986, which shows why I have some grey hair here.
Still can't beat me with that one.
In the UK. So I've done 5 startup companies, either UK, Silicon Valley, a bit of stuff in Asia as well. And the first, just to give a comparison, the difference, we started our first company in 86. It's kind of called Insignia Solutions, based in the UK. And the VCs, very known VCs, were called Rothschilds. They're not a VC at all, of course. There was no VCs in the UK in 1986. It was like Rothschild's Bank was and I do remember we were, and I won't name any names because some of them are probably still around. But we were, when we were pitching that, to them, and it wasn't PowerPoint, it was, physical, transparencies on a projector, because there was no PowerPoint in 86, literally putting them on the thing. And it went through it, and this is what we're going to build. It was Insignia was a very fast translator, so you could run back then, Mac, PC programs on a Mac and a Unix machine and a Sun and all that kind of stuff. And so we went through it all, and like half an hour, and they were all nodding, and we told me we built this large software here, and nodding, and then just as we came to the end, and we saw any questions, and we looked at each other, and then someone said, "Tell me, what exactly is software?" After half an hour of pitching this really techie software stuff, it was like, okay. And then that was how it started, really. We were really right at the start, in the UK anyway, when there was no VC community, didn't exist. And then a series of companies usually started in the UK, and then we took them to the US. We did with that one. And I ended up working off and on in the US as we built those companies, built the marketing presence and support in the US. There's no particular, there is no common technology thread that runs through those companies, other than they were really hard technical problems to solve, which required you to decide which 10 to 15% you weren't going to solve in order to have a realistic solution. That's the key, if you like. And if you've got really big, hard, hairy problems, they still exist because you can't solve it all. So then then the key is, well, which bits are you not going to solve to allow you to actually build a real solution that they can actually be supported in the market and get, real work done. And so, if I've developed a superpower over the years, it's kind of that. If you look at the big, hard, hairy problems to decide, well, which bits can we solve, package together, and actually create real marketable solutions without boiling the ocean because you never finish otherwise.
Yes.
And so the technologies were, emulated translators, 3D distributed database, 3D chat rooms, back in early 90s somewhere, way before there was anything that we know today, way before Second Life or rooms and that kind of stuff. It's apparently still in the Smithsonian Institute as the first ever 3D voice chat room. We had avatars and lip sync and all that kind of stuff. It's in there as the first ever one.
Well, was that what you presented alongside Bill Gates on stage?
It was indeed, yeah. That's right. Have you seen that?
I think so. Because I used to watch, because like in the 90s, like I was basically, because you say you started in 90, it was in 86. Like in 86, this is when I started to learn how to code when I was about 10 years old. So for me, the 90s was sort of the period where I really, like personally, I started to get really into sort of personal computing and so on. And as I like to say, tell the story very quickly, that like I discovered AI when I was doing my biomedical science degree in the late 90s, which is kind of bizarre because that's not what, what you would expect. But those days I used to watch all, whatever videos I can get my hands on, on the web, which is you had to, get cassettes and so all sorts of things.
Apparently that video is up there somewhere, I think.
I know it's,
Developer conference in, I don't know when it would have been, 93, 96 or something, I forget now. But with Bill Gates on stage when we just showed the avatars embedded inside, Windows panes and that kind of stuff. Which, those were the sort of things where we were trying to really push the boundaries of stuff that, that stuff worked off a modem. There was no, fast broadband back then. You had multi-user 3D chat rooms over modems, basically. So again, the idea of it's a hard problem, but if you can solve the right bits, then you can make it work usually. I then did another one with a colleague of mine, which looked was more a nanotech startup, which was looking at smart memory alloys to replace motors. Which we spent some time in mainland China building an R&D facility, which was an interesting eye-opening experience.
We'll talk about that if you want later as well.
It was interesting. Should have been 2004, 2005, something like that. And then I actually did a period at Credit Suisse. Ironically, they recruited me to make investment banking development more entrepreneurial, because at that point it was like, the only thing we could possibly do is build it ourselves because we're so special, and nobody could possibly build any software that could do our job. Which explains why they spent billions of dollars on software development.
Well, still is the case today with others as well.
And then the last startup, which was then acquired by, was a company called Transitive, spin out of Manchester University, did very fast binary translators that IBM acquired, and that's how I came to be at IBM. As they acquired the last company. So, I've said publicly before, I kind of imagine that I do a few years at IBM and then go do something else. But actually, found a very good, IBM turned out to be a very interesting company to work for. And I got a lot of freedom to go, do what I do, I think best, which is spend my time in the startup SME community who are trying to grow and scale to the enterprise. Spend my time helping them do that. Hopefully they'll use some IBM tech along the way, but in general, that's where I spend all my time, which actually is a pretty interesting fit, actually, because that's what I did for the last 35 years before that. So, that's kind of the potted history of the journey of how I came to be at IBM, if you like, by acquisition.
Yeah, which is very interesting because you sort of typically any entrepreneur, once they achieve an exit, they just move on to something else. So I always thought it was interesting that you actually decided to stay at IBM.
I did, yeah. I mean, I've done 5, so I'd cover the full bases, an IPO, some reasonable acquisitions and one fast sale. So so crash and burn. So
you've ticked all the boxes basically. There's nothing else to do, right?
All squares fit. So a few scars on my back to prove it. So but no, I mean the real reason was that actually the role inside IBM turned out to be very interesting, and at some point it's about what's the effect you can have on an area. The reason why we do stuff often is, what's the impact I can have? And yes, I could have gone another startup, but actually discovered a place where actually I can actually impact the growth of many startups. And so, you and I work together on whatever I'm trying to do. I work with a whole bunch of other companies. In some cases, actually, I'm actually, like mentoring the CEOs and so, or CTOs, for instance, because obviously I've kind of been there and done that, or been non-executive directors in some cases for some of those companies as well. And that's, kind of my roles going forward is, how could, particularly inside the UK, I'm driven to see, how can we really do a better job of providing a platform for fast-growing SMEs inside the UKI, and the AI is a good example. We have some, we have, as you know, a plethora of AI startups. Like many markets in the world. Not all of them are going to survive, of course, because that's the nature of these kind of frenzies. But if you look at London, Manchester, Bristol, some of those places, all the big cities, they have very vibrant startup communities, especially around AI and technology. And so I spend a lot of time actually trying to help that. And I think that's why I find interesting that I can have that impact. And so that's kind of why I'm still here.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And I think one of the reasons why you probably saw me on LinkedIn ranting about Brexit and things like that, because I honestly believe we had a once in a lifetime opportunity before Brexit to be, maybe I'm naive, but you can tell me if I'm wrong in believing that, but I honestly believe that we, as the UK, not London, the UK would have been the Silicon Valley of the world. Because, I'm one of the early founders of the Silicon Roundabout in London, and I've seen how many VCs were moving into London from Silicon Valley, but from all over Europe. They were coming here, investing in UK startups and AI and so on. And then just Brexit came in and just completely smashed all of that. And that's why I get so annoyed when I hear politicians from all parties going, oh, we want to make London and the UK the center of tech. I'm like, we were at the center of tech. Because I'm going to kill somebody if you carry on saying these things.
I agree. I publicly said I was obviously, very against Brexit, for many reasons. But one of the reasons is the one you articulate there is that, we were going great guns and had, lots of opportunity there. It's not so there's no opportunity now. It's a different, we've got to make the best of the framework we have.
So we're losing the race. That's the issue. I agree. Talk is cheap. People can say what they want about, we're going to make London, Manchester, UK the center of excellence. But talk doesn't do it. Talk does not do it, and you need to look at what's needed for those companies to really thrive. And it's everything from ensuring they have the right people to the right investment, rules and that kind of stuff, and all the talk about changing all the kind of high net worth, investment criteria. That doesn't help either. We're just talking about it and we're not really doing it right now, which is disappointing. I haven't heard a lot from anyone talking about actually how they're going to try and make that true, other than, some talk about, we'd like it to be so, but, wishing it won't make it so. The thing is the reality, because obviously I do hope that we as a country rejoin the EU, but the reality is I don't think the EU want us back. Certainly not until they know 100% that as that the political class generally say, you know what, we've screwed up, including the conservatives, which will take up a long time to say, you know what, we've screwed this one up. We should be in the EU. And I think it becomes like a collective effort. But then we would have to spend, I don't know how many years to get in. But the one thing
exactly. I think, I too hope, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I didn't want us to leave.
Well, not soon.
We are where we are, but it won't be soon. I agree. So if we want to achieve the things we're talking about there, then we have to act, and try and make the environment, significantly better than it is now. We still have absolutely fantastic talent here, as you and I both know. But we have to foster it. And it's not, you have to foster the environment where they can build companies, where they can be successful and get the advice, get the mentor, get the investment, hire great additional talent into their companies, that's curtailed compared with how it used to be. It's still better than many places, but there's so much more we could be doing to actually really, make that, far more attractive.
Okay, guys, I need a very big favor from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button because that makes a massive difference for our podcast. It literally costs you nothing other than a split-second click. But if you're also watching or listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a follow there. But in order for it to count, you also need to leave us a review. Please feel free to give us whatever review you think that it's fair, but it's important that you do, because otherwise they don't count your following. Why? I have no idea, but that's just how it is. But it costs you 3 seconds to do that. So I'll really, really appreciate it if you do that. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
Steering us back towards sort of your journey, because again, I see quite a few conversations, debates, I suppose, on LinkedIn regarding the hype cycles in terms of how the AI hype cycle now seems to be kind of growing out of control. And it's not the first time, but certainly I've never seen this level of hype towards AI. But I'm just interested because the arguments that I'm hearing, and I'm not sure whether I agree or completely, I mean, I generally disagree, but I see the point that the argument they're saying that the innovation that we're seeing right now with AI, it's driven predominantly by VCs and shareholders, the shareholder class, rather than innovators and entrepreneurs who throughout decades, they're the ones that were driving the ideas. Like you said, you come up with an idea, you go to a VC or even a bank in the good old days when they used to give money. That's how I got my first fund. Actually, it was a bank. But it was like, it's people like us, we come up with ideas and then we go to the funders and say, look, we think that this is a solution to this big problem, and you pitch it, etc. You get the cash and they drive you and help you build the business, build the solution and grow, scale, etc. But now, the hype cycle is not really driven by entrepreneurs. It's like somebody comes up with some idea, like we've seen with crypto. And you're like, okay, let's just push towards that. And you see all these presentations, right? For example, from Google and Microsoft, when they're presenting on stage, even Apple, I would say that when they were presenting about Apple Intelligence, I'm like, are you actually talking to the consumers or are you talking to the shareholders? And to me, it sounds to me that they're definitely talking predominantly to the shareholders and to some extent the consumers. I mean, Apple, I would say they're probably, because they've always been consumer centric with WWDC. But when I looked at how Microsoft were announcing, their developments recently, as well as Google, you can tell they were talking to the shareholders, right? And I'm just wondering, from your experience, I mean, have you seen that sort of, do you firstly agree with this argument that it's not really driven by entrepreneurs, but rather than the shareholder class? But also, what is this driver behind this relentless, overhyped, the relentless overhyped AI push towards AGI or something that we don't seem to need at this stage, certainly.
I mean, I think you're right. It's certainly probably the greatest hype cycle that I've experienced. And believe me, my first one was hard disk hype cycle. Would you believe? I think yesterday, where, literally everyone and their dog and their company were going to take over the world with a hard disk manufacturer as the leading hard disk drive manufacturer. Of course, 99% of them died very quickly because there only were a few, that survived, which are all dead now, basically, because it's all solid state. But anyway, but that's the first one I saw, actually. And that was pretty, thinking about it, was back as pretty intense as well. Obviously, the whole .NET kind of thing, internet one, it was kind of the second, really big one, which is probably the closest thing on par to what we're seeing now. Although it was more spread out, which it didn't seem so extreme. That's why I didn't, because it was, it took a while, because it was so broad, the thing they were doing, you feel like it was spread out. Whereas I think what makes this difference is it's like, it hasn't come out of nowhere, but it's come out really quick. You think back a couple of years ago, we just weren't talking about this stuff. Suddenly, it's
Well, not beyond the tech community. Obviously, GPT was already out there. We knew about
it. As a general thing that's been. And I guess there are some attributes that perhaps play into the thing you're talking about. The first thing is that, and we've all heard, the amount of money that's required if you really want to go develop, very large, foundation models, then that's a huge financial undertaking. So you've got to get that money from somewhere, and, at IBM, we invest that because we spend $6 billion in research or whatever it is, we do that every year. So, that's not to say, but our shareholders still have to, I guess, agree to that at some point, if you like. Yeah. But we've always done that. It's not a new thing for us to be investing $6 billion a year. But if you are a VC funded, then this is, and asking for checks of hundreds of millions, and then okay, that is quite different. It reminds me of the story where, people used to, ask me, certainly when I was doing the startup companies, so what's hot in the VC community? How do you know? Can you do a survey of the VCs to find out what they're investing in? Whereas now, believe me, all you have to do is drive from San Francisco to San Francisco airport and read the billboards. There's a billboard about every 200 yards. And I was there early this year, and every single sign had AI. Every single sign had AI on it. It was sell your house with AI. Use your fridge with AI. Literally, what didn't matter what the subject was, is it with AI. They just stamped that on, literally, because you had to have that moniker, otherwise you were behind. So that's one other aspect of this is, unless your product has AI in it somehow,
you're irrelevant.
Talk behind the curtain about exactly what that means, then you're not playing. So that's and all those companies are, probably growing VC, funded companies as well. So that's kind of another kind of gasoline on the fire type thing, is that all those companies are trying to imbue AI into that. Secondly, as I said, if you really want to build new foundation models from scratch, and it's not just the compute power you need to build a financial model, as for people listening to this, the cost of building a model is in a number of, buckets, if you like. But a huge one is the data that you're actually going to train the model with.
Yep.
And where you get it from, how clean it is, whether it's got duplicates, whether it's got fans, all the stuff. And that's a huge undertaking. If you have a really large corpus, which is the word you might hear, which means the data that you're going to train your model on, whatever it happens to be, not just, the huge number of compute hours to actually train your model, but all that work ahead of that, and there's post-training work as well, which is why it makes it so expensive. One of the things that, if you like, I see, and I think, you can see that, from what IBM are doing, is that one of the things that's really going to be at play here is, you could get the biggest modeler you can find, which costs an absolute fortune to create, and therefore is going to cost you quite a lot to run in production. The cost every time you send it a request, the inference cost, as it's sometimes called. If it's really big, it's going to cost, basically the bigger it is, the more expensive it is fundamentally to actually use it.
Yep.
And I think the real action is, okay, how can I use a smaller model, perhaps better targeted to the domain you want, and it be good enough compared with the best you could possibly do if money was no object? And is that, and how you decide whether it's good enough for the task at hand. And I think that's where a lot of the action is going to be, if you really want to actually, if you like, get away from purely the huge cycle of, build the biggest model and thou shalt win, which is sort of what, the kind of your comment about, building for the VC community or your investors is, like, we're going to build the best one.
It's the arms race. It was the biggest, how many trillions of parameters.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, and I hear quite a lot of debate about, because we're fairly early in implementation, as in people putting these things in production, it's like, well, how hard is it to integrate into your environment, and who's got the best tools? And those are important. They are, for sure. Yeah. But in the long run, what's going to cost to run it in production? And maintain it in production. And that's what's going to be the killer, or who's going to win the deal, is if they can show that they can do that for the best balance of accuracy that, that's acceptable to the particular case, and be trustworthy and to monitor it and answer all the questions. So that's why we spend a lot of time on that and less time about, we can build a model with, gazillion parameters and show that it could, because, and those are interesting pathfinders, but they're not really very relevant, I find, when, for actual, when you actually want to put this in production, which is smaller model, better managed. I know, in most cases, I understand the curated data sets that went into this so that, and I can monitor and manage that in production at a cost that is reasonable for the task that's at hand. And so, I look at those big hype cycles and I almost want to say, that they're interesting science experiments, in some respects, and they are pushing the boundaries of science. It's true. They are. And that's exciting as a scientist.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah. From the scientific perspective. Yeah.
But then, again, my whole ethos and everything is about, okay, that's a big thing we got. Okay, how do we actually use this thing to do real work? And so, if you like, I'm glad they're spending that money.
Yeah.
Because it is pushing the boundaries back. But those, the things that's not going to be the bit that actually causes companies to be able to accelerate their businesses by actually, using AI to augment their people and their processes, which is the thing that, if this is going to be successful, that has to happen. It's not going to. We're not just going to throw everything we got before away, just magically, this magic kind of omnipotent, AI being is going to do everything. That's not the way this is going to fly for, if ever. So, but certainly not in the foreseeable future. And so is that focus on how do we make it practical that I think is where the really interesting action is.
And obviously from the point of view of businesses, it's the ROI, isn't it? I mean, because I speak to CFOs and they're like,
Absolutely.
Sort of the typical language I hear from them or statements that I get from them. It's like, this sounds really exciting, etc. And okay, what happens once we spend all that money? When are we going to get a return?
Yeah.
And that's the issue. And I think this is one of the questions that no one is actually answering, because it's being that it's a journey. Which is the reason why I try to kind of emphasize the point that it is a journey, meaning that, okay, if you invest all of your money as an enterprise into AI, or even as a startup, not even an enterprise, as a startup, you might think, okay, it's really cheap for you to just, go to, probably Watson X or Azure or GPT or whatever. It's, they give you free credits, etc., which are all nice and lovely. But the thing is, once you, as you said, put it into production, let's say if it's a consumer-facing app and you have hundreds of thousands of users, the costs will explode.
Absolutely.
How are you going to pay for that? I'll get the VCs. Well, if you get the VCs want an exit within 5 years or even less.
Yeah.
So how are you going to make that money? And I think that's the kind of question that people don't seem to focusing on. It's all about, the bells and whistles. And like I said, from the scientific perspective, brilliant. It's amazing. I mean, somebody described that I'm very much, I don't believe in AGI. I think AGI as a concept is very interesting. But the question, I'm kind of like you in terms of, okay, why do we even need AGI in the real world? What problems are we solving with it? And I'm not hearing a useful answer. Somebody actually on LinkedIn told me, well, it could replace consultants. I'm like, well, are people complaining about consultants? I mean, there's a lot of them, right? But they're not useless. It depends on the consultant, I presume. But then, I mean, are we seriously telling me that we're spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars to build an AGI so that we can replace consultants? Really? Is that the value proposition?
I mean, if I was going to try and spin the argument and play devil's advocate, I'd say, obviously the big promise is that you develop once, costs a fortune, but once it's developed, that intelligence is there, for use, for forever, if you like, so and I'm going to pay the consultants if I'm going to go but it's not free, and so the question is, and whether it's AGI versus, today's capabilities of foundation models, it's not free. As you know, I've done these series of little AI videos, 60-second videos of AI, because to my previous point, I really believe that it's important that we find ways to explain what we're doing, and as you know, I use this as an analogy
I was about to say,
it's great. Foundation models like traditional models like a precision screwdriver, but this is like a general purpose model, can do everything, not perhaps as well as the original one, but pretty good. Where this falls down, of course, once I bought this, it doesn't cost me anything to use it. And that isn't the case with AI. It does cost me every time I use it. And as I said, the bigger the model, the more it costs me to use every time. And so I agree, what is the ROI, and is that a reasonable thing? What is the thing you're replacing or augmenting or accelerating or getting new business, whatever it happens to be? It can't just be for the sake of it. It has to be achieving something. And there are some cases. We've done it inside IBM, for instance. We, as I said, we concentrate on particular, if you like, not so much vertical sectors, but areas where we think AI can really improve. HR is one of the classic ones I talked about a lot, and we've done that ourselves, and it really can transform, cases. It's not about throwing all the HR people away. What it's doing is, if you look at the job of an HR person, they probably get, 95% of the questions they get asked are the same thing people have asked every day for the last 50 years. It's like, okay, how do I access my pension? How do I book my vacation? Whatever it happens to be. And so that's all handled by, AI today. And because most of those questions, AI is very good at, because it's very, very damn aperture, and we know exactly how to do that. And so some of those people, that workload take off them. They can now actually do kind of real HR stuff, which is how do you use HR as a way of accelerating IBM and spending time, attracting new talent, whatever it happens to be, not answering the questions that come up, 20 times a day. And so, so that's an example where I see where it does work, and again, it's hasn't got to be a particularly large model to do that, because the question you're trying to ask is a relatively narrow. If you expand that out more broadly, like digital labor in terms of encapsulating skills and knowledge in AI, that's a particular example of what you might call digital labor, if you like. And so that's that's one of the areas I do think that we will see, and they are seeing people use AI inside enterprises for, which is, how can you, encapsulate skills and knowledge that people do, so that, you could be more productive as a given individual, because the more mundane stuff can, just be automated. And that's a combination of automation and AI, if you like. Automation is driving it. AI can actually help you build those skills and knowledge that you then automate using an automation platform, whatever your choice happens to be. And so that's another area we see that. But it's interesting, you see, and if we compare those things to what you're talking about, it is such a chasm between those two, and that's where I think we are. We got the super hype stuff about, be it AGI and then what enterprises actually want to do, which is actually, let's give me some runs on the board that actually use this stuff to actually do things that are interesting, and we really can. It's not, the big, entity in the sky. It's how do we practically imbue AI and automation into the processes and procedures of enterprises, so that they can be more agile, more flexible, all that kind of stuff that means something. And then there is an ROI to that. And we see a lot of that kind of stuff going on, which I think is encouraging, that people are understanding how they do that part of it.
And I'm wondering if this is perhaps the reasons why some of the skeptics who say that the whole hype right now is not driven by innovators, because innovators by nature, they don't really care necessarily about the hype necessarily. Like they see a problem that probably some people wouldn't know about or care about, but it is a significant problem that, if it's solved, could make a huge difference, like the HR. Like you don't hear many people talk about HR, but actually, because we do, with Nano, with our chatbot, we're actually helping organizations with their HR. And it's not about replacing the HR managers, but it is really about, as you said, it's about helping the employees ask the key mundane questions. What's the policy for this? What's the spend limit if I travel, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And it, it provides the answer with a reference to the actual documents that we help the companies to upload, etc., so that the HR people can do the things that they like. So perhaps people don't talk a lot about it, but once they see it, it's like, actually, no, this is actually useful. And for me, it was always about, because from the medicine, like sort of medical background perspective, it's like one of the things that I always hear people like to talk about, AI would replace nurses or replace therapists or radiologists, which to me, obviously, is ridiculous. But what AI can do, and this is based on my conversations with actual nurses and doctors and radiologists, who they said to me, actually, we would love, there's a couple of nurses I met years ago who told me, what we would love to do is not to do the crappy admin work, because that's not what we're supposed to do. We didn't finish our nursing degree in order for us to do that. Our job is to look after the patients. This is what we're passionate about. This is what we love doing. We don't want the paperwork. So if AI can do that, we're happy. And in fact, AI is really amazing at doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the hype doesn't push for that. The hype pushes this nonsensical idea that actually we need to replace nurses rather than replacing them. And this is the point I'm trying to understand. It's like, where is this coming from? Because it's not the innovators. I doubt that innovators would be like, we need to replace nurses. I don't think so. No. That's the case.
And like you, I mean, I work with a number of companies in the medical space, and the ones that are innovator driven, they're not talking about replacing nurses at all. I mean, there are places. I think the one you identified is a great one for the admin paperwork. The other one where I've worked directly with several companies on, which is in digital pathology, which is there where AI already has shown to be to be good in terms of once you have digital scans or something, AI is actually very good at spotting what's in there. And in this country we don't have enough pathologists. We can't train enough pathologists. It takes forever, and things like that. Specific targeted areas, could be very transformational. I think, in terms of, you can think of an NHS system where, at the moment, there's lots of stuff, reports, we're going to build lots of new, scanning imaging centers. Well, that's great if you've got someone to look at the output.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, but if AI can do it, and it's been shown that, certainly if you use unsupervised learning by, for those listening, if you're training these more simpler models, you've got kind of, fundamentally two sorts of way of training a model. One is, imagine you were given the task of teaching a model to understand which of these scans, from whatever have to be, show cancer or not, sort of stuff. And so one way you do it is you get a pathologist, give them 200 scans and say, please circle the ones that have got the bad stuff in there. And then you train the AI model on that, and it will recognize the bits, when it's, funny blob like that. Okay, that's probably cancer. That's supervised learning. You've got someone to do it for you. The other way of doing it is get 200,000 case notes of patients and their scans and then let AI look at that. And that's like unsupervised learning, which is, you didn't tell it what to, you, Mr. AI, Mrs. AI, work out which bits in the scans were bad that meant that person got that disease. That turns out, if you've got enough data, to be far more accurate than the former one. And there are companies out there today which can show that AI will find things that the pathologists didn't realize were actually precursors to cancer because we would never train them on it, and so, the NHS is starting to deploy the breast cancers, or I think it's already deployed. I think one for prostate cancer that's coming out, and so we're seeing some of those things actually starting now. And things like that could be definitely transformational within a health service. And I agree, taking away the administrative, because any of us have been in hospital and you look at, someone's carrying around the case file that's all it's like this thick, and they're spending their time, and it's like, shouldn't have to do that, so like lots of things, we should look at the right areas where AI can really help. And let's concentrate on those, whatever the hype says about, it's going to slash X% of the workforce, irrespective, it's like, you've got to be, far more targeted and clever about thinking of that stuff.
So is that what, do you think then is true? That's why I think that people who say that it's the shareholder class, that it's not about innovation, it's about cutting the workforce. It's really about saying, you know what, let's, we don't need these workers, get rid of it. We've seen that with the Hollywood scandal, for example. When they say, can we use ChatGPT to replace writers, which is like, what? And I've seen, actually, I can't remember the report. I mean, I'll for the listeners, all the links that we talk about, as you know, we put it in the description and so on. So I'll find that report and I'll put it in the description. But there's this report, I think it was from Splunk, that was talking about why it was along the lines that the advantage of getting rid of workers, or that the workers are not productive enough. I mean, this seems to be a movement to me. I don't know if it's a political thing or whatever. I don't know. But there's definitely, I feel that there's some kind of this conversation brewing about, we don't need the workers anymore. And, we don't need to pay the workers as much anymore. Or that even the workers who are on the minimum wage, actually, they get paid way too much because AI can do something. And I'm thinking to myself, I think this is where the ethical AI discussion needs to come in. But I'm just wondering, is this whole conversation about replacing workers driven by that? It's not about innovations, but okay, look, we've got this thing that is kind of good enough. Like you said earlier, it's kind of good enough. Can we just get rid of all the workers and maximize profits? As opposed to augmenting, because that's not augmentation, is it? It's like if you're augmenting a person's capability, that means that person can do a lot more and achieve more and therefore generate more revenue. But this is this is the exact opposite. It's actually, no. Let's save costs, get rid of workers, put some crap AI that kind of works, but at least we can maximize profits in the short term. Yeah. Whatever happens in the long term, well, we'll worry about it then, which is, of course, very dangerous.
I think there's a couple of things at play, probably. I mean, first of all, going back to early on, we made comments about ROI, which is, if you need a simple ROI argument, then this is it. And so if people are desperate for an ROI argument, they will often leap to that. Well, we can take a third off the workforce. That's easy. Irrespective of whether that's a sensible thing to do or not. Sensibly ethically, sensibly practically, sensibly in terms of whether you'd actually end up with a good result for your customers for whatever company you're talking about, which in general you wouldn't. I mean, having said that, it's not to say that all jobs are immune to that. There are some, obviously, which you can imagine, which today are particularly administrative, information gathering and processing, which that stuff AI will do very well, in many cases. And so but it's not the jobs
that people like. So
that's the point. If you ask people doing that, and particularly people have to do that 80% of the time of their job, they'll tell you that's the worst 80% of their job. And so the impact is you'll get much more productive people. Now it's a separate argument. So, well, do I need as many? Is my market big enough that I can have that many productive people or not? But that's like a second, third order effect. So, and in general, we don't talk about the market constraining, the companies. It's more the companies are constrained because they can't afford the people, or they can't. It's all the way around. So at some point, we may discover there are limits in various markets. I'm sure we will, but we're way off that. We're way off that. And augmenting people to make them more efficient, to make companies more creative, more agile. That's where I think we should be focusing a lot of the stuff, a lot of our work. And yes, it will change. It still will change. It will change the face in some respects. In some places of the job market, it will. I was on a panel with the Experis Manpower Conference last month, I think it was, talking about reskilling in the age of AI, if you like. What does it mean? And one of the interesting discussions there was, people talking about, well, what should I, I'm trying to recruit people, how should I, what sort of people should I be recruiting, if you like, given the fact that AI might change my business, and one of the kind of, lines that I evolved there, which is, we talk a lot about hard skills and soft skills when we talk about people, what their capabilities are. And, usually, and we don't say this, but often people mean hard skills. We've got to have those. It'd be nice if you have some soft skills as well. We don't usually say that, but usually that's what people mean when they talk about that. Well, actually, if you think about it, AI is going to be very good at a lot of the hard skills and much less good at the soft skills. I mean, there are people who argue with that statement and say, yeah, AI can be empathetic and all that, but certainly to start with, it's the hard skills that AI will end up doing. You know, I want to code in C++, or I want to be able to, you know, understand legal, blah, 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 what happens to be. So I think from thinking about individuals going forward, both your own development and how you should think about what your skills are, actually soft skills are going to become increasingly important compared with what you think your hard skills are. And that's true if you're changing jobs, starting the job market at our ages, whatever it happens to be. But those soft skills are going to be increasingly important because that's what is going to help you do really well as, if you like, the capabilities of people and technology and companies just rapidly, you know, does change as AI gets imbued. And so that actually resonates with a lot of people. And I actually evolved that thinking actually while on the panel in the conference, because I hadn't thought it through before, but it suddenly occurred to me that actually is actually going to be one of the impacts. And so we get fixated about the hard skills we have and fill out our resumes with these things. But actually, if I'm an employer recruiting people, then I'm going to be a lot more interested in your soft skills. And so how you present yourself and how you think about yourself, I think, is going to be increasingly important for people who are out there in the jobs market and thinking about changing roles, what happens to be, or just want to do a better job inside your own enterprise.
So that comes down to education, because this actually reminds me of the conversation I had with Professor Jeremy Leavesley. He was a mathematician, applied mathematician. So basically his job, it's about real world application of maths.
Right.
And it's quite fascinating because he was saying to me things like, you know, people think about maths, they think about, you know, the times tables that they teach kids at school, you know, standard deviation. And he's like, actually, none of that is important. Maths, actually applied maths, it allows you to represent the whole universe through a few calculations on a piece of paper. And that kind of gives you a completely different perspective of life, of science, how you solve problems. And to him, the thing that he does not like about the education system, because he's an educator, he used to teach as well, that he's like, that we teaching the sort of stuff, like the analogy he uses, like, you know, if you love English literature, you just want to read the books. You love the stories, right? You don't really care much about the grammar. Unless you want to be the writer, then you need to worry about the grammar and study grammar. But when you go to schools, they don't teach you grammar from day one, right? They read you the stories, they engage in the conversation with the kids, and the kids tend to really love stories and love reading, etc. So to him, maths, it should start in that way, but teaching them all of the stuff that they teach right now, including the times tables, it's like teaching you grammar before you learn how to read.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting point, which kind of reminded me like what you said in terms of soft skills. Because soft skills is not something that, you know, as somebody that's been through the whole education system, even now with my kids as well, it's like they teach the hard skills, like you said, but the soft skills, you know, things that even to do with creativity and even things like, you know, I love music, for example, and arts. And to me, I think music, arts, design, these are the sort of things that really make you think and focus on the soft skills, emotional intelligence, understanding how people think. None of that is being prioritized. And I'm thinking,
I agree. And you know, and you know, another thing we can probably get onto, and you and I talked about before, obviously, is one of the biggest risks I see for AI is nothing to do with jobs and that kind of stuff. It's more the disinformation capability. You know, you take AI, generative AI plus social media, you know, equals pandemonium, in my opinion. You know, and we're already seeing it now, but we've only seen a little bit of it because it's going to be like, and you know, and whilst technology can help a little bit in terms of, you know, seeing through that and you know, watermarking or whatever happens to be, you know, but we need to be teaching, critical thinking, if you like, is you can argue whether it's a hard skill or soft skill, but I mean, but the idea of being able to take a step back. I had this great physics teacher at school, but it wasn't about the actual aspects. He had this technique, this idea was said, okay, well, I think that's the answer, but let me take a step back and think, well, if that's true, then that would be true. Or that's not true. You know, it's this idea of just taking a step back and looking at whatever the thing is in the round more broadly. And we are starting to apparently teach that a little bit in school now. But that, you know, things like that, which are going to be incredibly important to be able to think about. And you know, I'm reading this thing about, you know, Henry Nash went to space and robbed a bank, and there's a picture of him doing it. It's like, is that really likely? You know, I mean, you know, you know, to be able to get, you know, people to be able to think that way, I think is going to be crucial. You know, just one of the additional tools we're going to need in our arsenal as humans to actually, you know, for society to withstand the onslaught. I think we're starting to see, and will see more in the next, you know, 5 to 10 years, where, you know, as you know, I've written a few books, and the last one was about history, letters to dead people, was about, you know, just a fun way of looking at people in history and comparison. The one I'm working on right now, which may or may not come out, which is called Artificial Truth, which is to be about that point about, you know, how do you recognize what is going to be the value of truth? And how do you sustain the value of truth in a world which is full of artificial truth, which may or may not be true? You know, if you like, it's like, you know, and we kind of, society is kind of based on, well, this stuff is right and this stuff is wrong. And okay, there's some disagreement over there, and we can debate that. But we already see what's happening, which is it's sort of splitting apart, and they're just saying, well, that's not true, irrespective of, you know, it may be factual and based on science, but that's, you know, alternative facts and all that kind of stuff. You know, we see that already, and it's only going to get worse, I think, because you can, you know, harness social media behind these things, you know, in such a way that it'll convince a lot of people that, you know, without arming them with additional capabilities, I think, to be able to kind of see through some of that.
Yeah, but then it's a bit late now. I mean, obviously, this is like something we have to think about with the future generations rather than, you know, where we are right now. Because one of the condescending, you know, we talked about Brexit very briefly, and it's like one of the most condescending things I hear or heard, like, you know, it's been covered in the news. Like, oh, it's the poorly educated working class, blah blah blah, which complete utter nonsense. Because actually, I think some data shows that in fact the so-called working class, I mean, I don't know what that means these days. I mean, we live in a very different world, but definitely people who actually benefited from various funds from the EU, like for the local communities and stuff, they actually did not vote for Brexit, but it's the sort of more of the middle class, like people that live in the countryside. They're the ones that voted for Brexit, and they are effectively, supposedly, the more educated ones, privately educated, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen a good breakdown, but I mean, I you know, if there's a lesson for Brexit, I think it's that, you know, the assume is a dangerous word in the English language. And we just, you know, for those who, you know, those who are in government or pro the EU, just assumed that everyone understood the benefit of it. And, you know, the reality was that people didn't necessarily understand the benefit.
Exactly.
So, you know, and so assume is indeed one of the most dangerous words in the English language, as far as I'm concerned. And we're all guilty of it from time to time, is we just assume somebody else, some group, whatever, you know, sees things the way it does in your own head. And so, again, that's about
critical thinking.
How is it we describe stuff? You know, how you know, and how, you know, we must make sure we describe things in a most broad fashion so that it is understandable by, you know, in whatever field you're trying to explain stuff in. That, you know, that don't assume that they're thinking like you or got the same Myers-Briggs score, whatever happens to be, whatever way you think of classifying personalities, because they probably have.
For those of you who followed me for a while, you would know that I'm neurodivergent, meaning that my brain is kind of unpredictable. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It has its own mind, so to speak. But one of the things that I really did struggle with my entire life, including today, is focus. So I was terrible at school as a result of that. I couldn't focus at university. I can't even focus when I'm working on my desk. And the big problem for me was figuring out ways to help me do that. The strategy that worked for me my entire life was actually music. But I would spend hours, literally hours, figuring out the songs that work best for a particular mood, whether I wanted to focus on something or wanted to relax or wanted to sleep, whatever it is, I would have to find the right song for that. And it kind of worked. Though it wasn't predictable, like I said, I would waste a lot of time trying to figuring out until I discovered our new partners, Brain FM, who actually used real science to figure this issue out and build an app that creates functional, music engineered to sync with your brain. I'm telling you guys, this is real science, because they actually created a patented approach that as many of your brain cells, your neurons, are bringing all of the electrical signals to focus collectively into that one task that you're doing, or even if you want to relax or if you want to sleep. I absolutely love the interface. It's super simple. You can just choose what it is that you want to do, whether you want to focus, you want to relax, sleep, or meditate. And you can build your own list of some of the favorite songs that they produce. And I have to highlight that a lot of these songs are actually produced by real human composers. And it's lovely, lovely app that you can download onto your computer, your mobile phone, or you can just listen to it online. It's really simple. It's really cool. But above all, it works. If it works on my brain, it should work with your brain as well. So if you check out brain.fm/CEOR, and you'll see a dedicated page to our podcast, and you will get an exclusive, really, really long free demo that you can just download the app and listen at your leisure. No limitations. You can try it for yourself and see if it works. Let me know if it does work for you, because I absolutely fell in love with this thing so quickly, like within a couple of weeks. And I thought I have to reach out to these guys, because also I want to support independent businesses. So check out brain.fm/CEOR, and the big thanks to Brain FM for supporting the podcast. And now back to the episode.
And this is why, even though I'm a scientist, but I think schools should drop the STEM subjects altogether, to be honest with you. Because I think, because I use my kids as an example, because both of them are highly creative. Like my son, for example, he just finished school, so now he's a proper grown up, which is like, yeah, okay, I believe it when I see it. I don't know if he'll watch this, probably he'll start complaining that I said that. But anyway, but he actually made a beautiful point to me, because he's an aspiring actor. He's a phenomenal actor, and I'm not saying this because he's my son. Like, he got recognized by the National Musical Youth Theatre and people like that, and they selected him out of thousands and thousands of other kids, yada yada. So all of that lovely stuff, and he's performed in various different things. He's really, really good, like naturally talented kid. And he happens to be he's fairly good with maths, right? He's not bad with maths and physics and so on. But when he was doing his GCSEs, he was like, I find these things interesting, but why the hell do I need to study these things? Because I have zero interest in them. Why are they forcing me to learn maths, physics, chemistry? I just want to be an actor. I don't want to learn any of that stuff. Okay, you can teach me generally, for me to have the knowledge. Yeah, that's cool. But do I have to do the exams? Do I need to waste my time doing the exams about the things that I have zero interest in? And I think that's a really good point. It's like this idea of forcing the kids to learn subjects that, frankly, yes, as a scientific subjects are very important. I'm not saying that physics and maths aren't important, but if you're not interested in them, from your point of view, they're useless. Because that's not part of...
Depends on the...
No, because the reason I'm saying this, because like, for example, one of the things I've done recently, like I was listening to the radio, and they were asking young people, because we have this for the listeners who live outside the UK. I mean, there's this ridiculous debate that was going on in the UK about dragging the UK out of the European Court of Human Rights. So basically, yeah, the only countries that did that is Russia and Belarus. Just so that people understand why this is not a good idea. That means we, as the British population, lose access to human rights, basically. But that was this weird discussion going on. And the thing that really concerned me, that they were asking young people, so university graduates, so educated, right? If they've heard of that court, the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. And the answer was no. So what's that? And I thought, so how could you not know that? Because you see, if they were to vote, let's say if we had, God forbid, another referendum, whether the UK should leave this court, these people would say, oh yeah, let's leave it because we should do it ourselves, which is like, no. And this is the key thing for me. Or like Rishi Sunak, yeah, he's really good at maths apparently. Yeah, the guy doesn't know how to pay for stuff on the till. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you see, this is the issue. Maybe like schools should focus on teaching the important things, things like that, the daily things that we should all know about. You mentioned history. I mean, your book is actually great, by the way. just I'd say that publicly. But again, things like that. You see, this is your book, for example. It's great fun, a fun way of learning history, especially for kids. I think that's fantastic. Why do they have to study the whole detailed history and get exams about it, etc.? Basic stuff, which again is part of the soft skills, critical thinking, knowing that how the world works, how money works, how economics work. And things like that. I see my point. So,
and I've, I mean, I'm a scientist as well, so I'm not going to diss, math physics and chemistry, but I do think we need it. Yeah. The thing is, you have to think about, like lots of things in life, what's the least worst option? I mean, I think that we're missing out on a bunch of stuff we should be teaching, to your point, exactly. Mm-hmm. And there's not an infinite number of hours the kids are in school. So something has to give, so I do think there's a strong argument for how do we kind of rethink how you use the split between subjects, in a way that is, allows more breadth in the curriculum. I think that I'm 100% with you. And it may be that having math, physics, science, biology, for instance, okay, those are 4 sciences, do you, can you combine some of those or so that I still think it's important to teach some of that stuff, but, we need a much broader curriculum. And so something has to give, otherwise there's not enough time. So I'm not suggesting I necessarily have the right answer, but I'm definitely open for reimagining what a curriculum should look like. So we can include some of these things we talked about, which I think are absolutely crucial. And I think will ensure the person leaving school or going to university and build on that, and same will be true for university as well, be a much more productive and effective member of society straight out the back, because they have more life skills trained, if you like, that they're going to need. And
those soft skills again, isn't it?
Than there would have been 20 years ago as well. Yeah. I mean, to some of the points we've already made, and it's always difficult to train people for a future that's not quite here yet. But, but some of the predictions are pretty obvious what's going to happen. So yeah, I would definitely be up for, a rethinking of what our curriculum should look like to allow greater breadth of the curriculum to include some of the things we talked about.
Should AI be part of that? In a sense, like should they
teach kids learning about AI, or AI helping drive the curriculum?
Well, both. Like, so you learn about the AI, how to use AI responsibly. So you're not using it to generate porn, which is like the first thing that people seem to be doing online these days.
That's how videotape started. So.
Yeah.
That's what it was used for. So, unfortunately.
Even e-commerce started by that.
Exactly.
Crazy.
I mean, exactly. So, unfortunately, the soft underbelly of humanity is never far away, should we say.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are 2 questions there, which is learning about AI. Absolutely, I think.
From very young age.
There's a much broader sub-question about AI acting as teachers, and that's a huge subject in its own right.
Not to replace teachers, I hope, right? Not to replace teachers. Support, not to replace teachers.
No, not to replace teachers, but in terms of like, how creating personalized learning plan, all that kind of stuff, when the student's capability. So you're not going to doing one thing for the whole class, but you can do it differently for each of the people. Actually, I'm not arguing particularly for or against that, but I mean, those are some of the discussions that are going on about whether AI can help in teaching or not. And, you've got people on one side of the spectrum who say, you want a teacher for every 2,000 kids because the AI is doing the rest, which, I'm not sure I subscribe to that extreme, and then you've got the other end, which is that, you shouldn't touch it at all. And like everything, AI can be a great tool if you use it right. And we should look at ways we can do that. I read a great book called recently, Think Again by Adam Grant. I mean, it's not, it's been out for a few years now, but it's a really great book. Really it's about rethinking what you know and what you don't know, sort of stuff. But one of the things came out of was looking at what type of teaching do kids learn the most out of, and if you could, and broadly you got, traditionally you got, lecturing, and then you got kind of hands-on experimentation of something, and if you have a really great lecturer, who's really dynamic, everyone agrees if it's a rubbish lecturer, then obviously, kids don't like that sort of thing. We get that bit. But if you've got a really great, enigmatic lecturer versus, kind of experimentally hands-on, the kids will generally say, I prefer the enigmatic lecturer. But the evidence suggests they learn more, they still learn less doing that, however enigmatic that lecture was, than when they have hands-on and they do stuff and they explore themselves, directed exploration, if you like. Which I thought was interesting, it's one of the little things, out of the book, which I find interesting. And so to this point about how would, if you want to capitalize on that, how would you create individualized experimentation, and maybe AI can help in that, for instance, without having to have a teacher per person, which, would be great, but not practical. So I suspect there is some imbuing in that, but, need to be pretty careful on how we do that for sure. So,
yeah. Right. So I guess the question now, because obviously now generative AI is the sort of the creme de la creme of AI for now. But I think there is another elephant in the room that I don't feel many people talk enough about. And I know IBM is excelling at it, which is, of course, quantum computing. And I'm just interested in your opinion, once the current hype dies, which I think is going to be sooner rather than later. Obviously, again, I want to see your opinion on this one. But when are we going to reach a point where we'll be like, all right, the current infrastructure is a serious bottleneck, and we need to start using quantum computers en masse, which is still quite highly experimental. But I know, for example, the Chinese, they're building quantum computing farms, which is, whoa. It's like, we don't have that. I'm not sure if we have that in the West, but definitely the Chinese, they seem to see that this is the natural direction now. Because, we've got the generative AI stuff, we've got the cloud infrastructure, etc. But if we are to push the boundaries with AI in an unprecedented way, quantum computing is the future. And they're now investing crazy amount of money on quantum computing farms. Now, I'm just wondering from the point of view of, yourself and obviously as IBM, what is the direction of play here? Where are we going, do you think?
Yeah. So, obviously IBM's heavily invested in quantum. Obviously, we're one of the leading leaders in the whole quantum field. We put our quantum computers up on the internet for people to play with. Anyone could go and play with our quantum computers and so forth. And we've got some of the largest quantum computers, which are measured in what's called qubits, like number of bits you have and so forth. And we have some of the largest, that exist in the world. It's, we're at the point, so a couple of things. First of all, quantum is not a replacement for traditional computing. That's the first thing. So just because, you'll hear things like quantum can do stuff super fast and, all these things can be done together. It doesn't mean you can, doesn't mean you don't just take your program, combine it up, it runs faster on quantum. That isn't the way it works, at all. So there are certain problems which are very, very hard to solve on a classical computer, which quantum computing should be able to solve and will be able to solve. No question about it, will be able to solve. Today, we're just at the point when you can start showing that stuff, that you can actually do these things, and pretty soon they will outperform the classical computers. We're literally on the cusp of that right now. For various problems that are amenable to the sorts of programming that you have with quantum computing. Just having a farm of them individually doesn't necessarily help you very much. What is actually particularly mind-blowing, and we'll dive into a little bit of science here, is that the way quantum computers work is that you have these individual atoms, if you like, you can consider them, and they become entangled. That means, which is a physical thing, which means, it's been shown to be true that you can entangle these elements, and in theory, if you do something to one, instantaneously the other one will see the effect, seemingly breaking the speed of light. And it's been shown you can show it through light from distant stars that this is true, even though it sort of shouldn't work, but it does. And so, typically traditional computers have been done by entangling particles, within a single computer. The latest IBM stuff that we're rolling out actually entangles them between quantum computers, which is like, what?
Okay. I didn't hear about that. That's interesting.
Which actually blew my mind totally. It's like, we can do that? So that is the case where actually having more than one actually does help when you can do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a quantum scientist by any means. And so the description I gave was kind of a layperson, on purpose made that kind of layperson's view to imagine what's going on, which is like you've got these connected particles and connect a lot of them together, then, they can act in concert in a way that essentially means they can do a bunch of stuff essentially at the same time. That's a very simplistic view of quantum computing. And the more you have, the more you can do, if you like. And that is hard because it's really hard to do that entanglement. Really hard in just, vibration, noise, heat, everything destroys it, which is why quantum computers run at like some ridiculously cold temperature that's only a few tenths of a degree below absolute zero. So, you don't typically have them on your desktop, next to the kettle. That doesn't work. So
it doesn't fit into your smartphone.
Exactly. So it's been a while yet. But all that's, we're absolutely, it definitely is going to be a key, next generation technology, if you like. It's here already. It's showing its impact already, because one of the things that it will be able to do is break most known computer security codes. We rely on, the various, security codes to encrypt data and so forth. If you can do lots of calculations sort of at the same time, you can effectively brute force, crack, today's security codes, however many bits it may have.
Apparently, blockchain can decrypt the entire blockchain network.
It's like potentially, and so the way that today, the quantum computer is already having an impact in the market is that if you're an entity which, is required, say, by law to keep data safe for the next and retain it for 7 years, then within that time frame, today's encryption will be broken. So it's like, oops. And so companies like IBM, what we already provide, and in fact, IBM have put forward, I think, there's a bunch of standards going forward for what's called quantum safe encryption algorithms, which don't actually need a quantum computer to run on. You can actually run them with classical computing, but they encrypt data in a way that will prevent quantum computers from cracking it in the future. And today, it's not being ratified as standard. I think there was 4 or 5 proposed standards to be endorsed, and IBM put forward 3 or 4 of them, if you like. So, out of that research group. And we work with clients a lot now about, okay, how are you going to implement, what do you need to do to your strategies today so that you actually ensure that you can keep your data safe as quantum computer capabilities come around, whether you have them or bad actors have them, which, to your point earlier, because the way it's encrypted today will not be safe. And so even before quantum computers are here, in terms of their processing capability, doing stuff that you couldn't do on a classical computer, it's affecting the landscape of enterprises because they need to, because it's coming, and the technology problems have been solved in terms of it's a scale out problem. Not say it's easy, it's very hard, but it will happen. And so you must look to solve those problems and protect yourself from that capability today. And so, we have a huge practice that does just that and talks to enterprises about how they look at their data retention strategies and stuff like that to make sure that the stuff they encrypt now will stay so, over the required period where they must retain that data.
And how would that impact the AI market in general? Because one of the things that we're doing, in fact, interesting, I think I did mention this to you a while back, that because one of the part of the research we've done is about that. It's like, how do we protect data? How do we make the data quantum computing safe? And a couple of our mathematicians actually came up with this whole idea. So how about if you completely ditch decryption altogether and come up with something totally different? And amazingly, it's like we accidentally, the models we built around using AI, is that it accidentally invented a language, which is not a human language. But the way this works, again, not to get too technical, but effectively it compresses, it takes a copy of the original data, but not the full copy. So it's kind of like, when you read a book, you get the gist of it, right? And basically it compresses that into this weird non-human language, and that becomes the source of truth for the AI model. So it doesn't go to the original data at all. So that's kind of locked away somewhere. Nothing can access it. So it uses that. And of course, if that needs to be updated, if the original data sets have been updated, then that would happen once in a while. But again, it's an experiment. We're not saying that it's definitely going to work. But as I said, there's loads of different theories. But that's why I was saying, like, where do you think, in our case, the AI is not necessarily involved, or it's not better, but at least we're using AI to solve that one particular problem in terms of data security for quantum computing. But what you're saying is that the idea that AI models themselves could not run on quantum computers, because that seems
not
to
the way
be
they're built today. Not the way they're built today. I mean, it's not to say there aren't attributes of that. I mean, I'm probably not knowledgeable enough about some of the ways that the underpinnings of that we done, which not to say that some of the stuff could not be accelerated, and it's just as you distribute the kind of processing power across, because the way quantum will be deployed is that, in a simplistic example, the way we have CPUs and FPUs today and so forth, and, NVIDIA chip cores and that kind of stuff, which different workloads run on, a very simplistic analogy is that, quantum will be the same in terms of, those compute resources will be available in your infrastructure. And there's no reason why you can't and wouldn't create workloads that will be spread across those multiple compute domains. And so, where appropriate, you can use quantum, for whatever has to be programmed, obviously, that part of it has to be programmed in the way that, it can run on a quantum hardware. But, there's no reason why it couldn't play a role inside, the running of AI if the bits of AI are appropriate for a problem that can be solved better on a quantum computer than a classical computer.
So who should start thinking about quantum computers now? I mean, startups or enterprises, or no one yet?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that because it does potentially knock holes and change what isn't possible in computation. The stuff it solves just is unsolvable basically with classical computers, and so you can't do it in any lifetime. That's why it's considered fundamental, because it does change the shape of things, if you like. And so we do need to think about that. And so, it's right that governments are thinking about that. Security services are thinking about that for obvious reasons. Large enterprises are thinking about that, and the big technology players, IBM see that as a new core area that we're investing in very heavily, even though we know it's not there yet today. But we're convinced that it is going to be one of those fundamental changes in the computing architecture, if you like, and computer infrastructure, that is something that we're invested heavily in already, and have been for many, many years already. As you could imagine, and many of the breakthroughs have come out of IBM labs in Zurich and other places around the world.
Which is the reason, again, going back to the hype, because of course, part of the sort of the other side of the AI hype right now is what I like to describe the ethics bros, right? So you've got those people. So what we've been talking about, I suppose, the AI bros, they're the ones that say, oh, AI can replace everything, everybody, yada, yada. But then you've got the other side, the nihilists, who say, oh, AI is a danger to humanity. It will end humanity, etc. And to me, I'm thinking to myself, actually, I think the quantum computing issue with data, the fact that it can decrypt everything that is out there already. And as you said, like even old, like data sets that have been decrypted with old models, God knows how many years, even decades ago. To me, I think this is actually really serious. This is actually much more dangerous than whatever AI could do to humanity. But again, part of the hype, this idea that AI will end humanity, which, you know, what do you think about that? I mean, because obviously,
I don't subscribe to that. I mean, not in the way that, certainly not in the way that those people think about that, which is, in the way that, nanotech will turn the world to globs or whatever the other thing was. But like everything, it's going to challenge society in a number of different ways. And we discussed many of them in this discussion today. I think our role as, if you like, technologists and scientists is to try and, more broadly, not hopefully you and I, to actually
outside
help
the bubble,
outside the bubble, to help society decide the approaches to handle those areas where both quantum and AI are going to affect basically the fabric of society, be it, the kind of the artificial truth stuff we talked about, or the fact that you can crack anything that's secret today, or, you can solve problems you couldn't do before, or what must teaching look like in order to better equip the next generation of people to operate in the world we think it's going to be like in 5-10 years time. Those are all societal questions about how do we approach those things, what resources do you put behind them, essentially that should be our role for those of us who are interested in outside the bowl, beyond the technology. That's where we should be spending our time, just try and educate people about, so we can start the conversations, help provide input to those conversations, which won't be easy because, the very nature of some of the discussions means you'll get people on both ends just throwing the mud, which isn't a debate. That's mud throwing,
Well, we get a lot of that here, so I find it quite hilarious sometimes, so it's fine.
What's the saying that arrogance is ignorance combined with overconfidence, or whatever it is.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, which is, when people, people haven't thought it through, or have the luxury of having explained to them in a way that actually makes sense.
But some people kind of believe in it, like literally. It kind of like, like with Brexit, like if you say anything against Brexit, that means you're anti-Britain. It's like, it's just, it's complete nonsense.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you see that with AI. I mean, I do get, you've probably seen that on LinkedIn as well, but I've seen this, on social media generally. Some people say things like, well, actually, I would trust AI over a human being any day. And I'm like, why? Why? I mean, it's actually sad if you think like that. But at the same time, AI is not some sort of, organic being that came out of nowhere. It's built by the very humans that you don't trust. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, because educating, I agree with you. It's so important that we actually, the innovators, and obviously the more experienced, the better, like yourself. That's the reason why I asked you, if you could join us in here, because you've got way more experience than I am. And I think we need more people like yourselves to go out there and actually educate people as much. But sometimes I wonder, like people, they stick to what they want to hear. They like this Hollywood approach to AI, and it sounds nice to them. So, well, actually, no. I trust that AI because I don't trust people. That means you've got issues perhaps with people, but I'm just wondering how would this progress?
I think it's one of the. You're asking what you're really asking is a much broader question here about, how do you have debate about science, if you like, in the modern society? I mean, it's fundamentally the question you're asking because, we see plenty of armchair, scientists and all that kind of stuff. And they may be right, they may be wrong. I mean, that's the point of, if you like science, is that, okay, well, any theory is as good as any other theory, just what's the evidence and can you test it or not? And so, opinion isn't science. It's just opinion. You got to back it with something. And so if there's another soft skill, if that's the environment we're in, which it is, then there are soft skills I think that we all have to learn, which is, just saying I'm right, you're wrong doesn't help. I mean, it's been shown, whether if you talk to people who are conspiracy theorists, that doesn't make any impact whatsoever.
Yep.
Here's the 400 different documents that prove you're wrong. Doesn't make a blind bit of difference, And so there are soft skills in terms of how you have conversations, I think, with people with people who have very entrenched beliefs, which you believe aren't based on fact and science. They're based on just opinion, if you like. And how do you have the conversations with those people to allow them to at least get to look at that there may be another option to what they believe. But we're getting close to psychology here now. So, but there is, and I think that's one of the reasons why as scientists in general aren't very good at this, because
we're very much
we are very much focused in that area. And if you're not, then what do you mean you don't? It's it's the fact. I mean, look, how can you dispute that? But so we have to get better, I think, at understanding that just talking sciencey doesn't necessarily work. We have to as they say, if the message is not getting through, it's not necessarily the person receiving it. You're not sending the message right. And so I think we have to get better at developing in general. If we need to have these large societal conversations, which we do, then how we present the science behind that and how we talk to people about science, has to change. Otherwise, we won't reach consensus in any shape or form.
So like you said, perhaps AI is forcing us as a society to pretty much change everything that we've been doing, like from education and above, the way we do everything, practically, isn't it? It sounds like
it. Yeah. It is. I mean, I wouldn't say AI has caused that, because I think there were already signs that there were fractures in society before we got it, but
it exposes it more.
I mean, there's chasm. It's just like pulling it apart, because it's this thing, and and quantum maybe to a less extent, but AI particularly, I think, causes a whole bunch of way in which we need to talk about technology and science to be different, because it's, we've labeled it artificial intelligence, for God's sake. So.
Yeah, which actually, that's an interesting debate on its own right, because like I've seen as well today, somebody was, and it's not the first time I've heard this, at least maybe since 2015. This idea that, once AI effectively becomes conscious, although we don't really know, again, as a scientist, what does that even mean? But let's say when people think that it's conscious, right? Should we offer AI some kind of a human right type approach? Have you heard about that? It's like, should we abuse AI in that way? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, you see, on one side, it's an interesting question, because in effect, AI it forces us to perhaps explore our own behaviors. It's like, if we're mistreating people, maybe we need to kind of change that. But
there's another hour debate right there. But I mean, but to pick up, I mean, and this isn't even AI. I mean, as you know, Boston Dynamics is that they come in build these amazing robots. So, there's a bunch of videos on the internet you can see. There's one particular one where it's a humanoid Boston Dynamics robot. It's walking around carrying stuff, and there's one bit where they're testing to see whether it can balance or not. And there's this guy pushing it with a stick, and it keeps wobbling and then falling. You start thinking, don't be mean to that.
I've seen the responses on Twitter as well.
That's what your reaction is. Even though there's really not even any AI in that. It's really just, a bunch of, control stuff. But still, because it kind of looks human and you think it's, it's like, don't poke it with a stick. That's cruel. It's like, so, that's a precursor to, I think, the thing you're talking about, which we'll get lots of debate, I'm sure, and so forth. So.
But isn't that kind of silly? Because I'm thinking to myself, okay, so people worry too much about how an AI or robot feels. Yet, I mean, again, I probably going to get a little bit political here, but like we have homeless people, like actual humans on the streets, and nobody seems to care, or at least not enough. But the debate is about, should we care about, how AI might feel? But AI, firstly, does not feel anything. It's a machine. It's a bunch of algorithms. But so we're kind of like thinking, okay, well, I'm thinking rather, it's like, so you worry too much about how a robot feels because you push the robot around, but yet there are literally millions of people around the world being pushed around. And exactly. nobody seems to care. So, what do you think about that? It's like, how do we solve that?
There was there was an article a year or two ago in San Francisco when, and it was basically saying one of the latest technologies that was developed was, it was basically something like a robot dog or something which would deliver your takeaway to your door. You can order, with no human hands involved, and they showed it, and literally. And they trained it so it would walk over the homeless people, not stepping on them, to get to your door to deliver your, and the thing was, maybe we're solving the wrong problem.
Yeah.
Which got a point. That actually, they spent a lot of time making sure it could walk over the homeless people who were lying in the street, in order to deliver your takeaway. Which was, that struck home as saying, I've always believed that, we are, some of the problems are totally solvable. It's just a matter of will. And as a society, we haven't had enough will to fix it. And we know, plenty of studies done in plenty of countries that show how to almost eradicate homelessness, for instance, but we don't have do we have the societal will to fix it? And we don't seem to, at least not on a political level anyway.
Well, some countries manage. I mean, the Nordics apparently achieve.
They do, absolutely right.
Yeah. They're not socialist states. Last time I checked.
Absolutely right. So again, it's back to that thing about societal. A lot of it's interesting, isn't it? A lot of the big problems like this, which start off as we started all this about AI and technology and science, but they evolve into societal decisions about how we handle these things. I think that's why these technology advances are so crucial and large, because they do have broad societal impacts as opposed to other things which, mentioned the spreadsheet was fantastic, unbelievable, but didn't quite have the societal impacts that we're talking about here. Actually, it was used everywhere, but didn't have such an impact.
So is that going back to the point about who's driving the conversation and the hype? Is it basically the people who probably do not actually care? People, neoliberals, I suppose, or whatever, the Liz Truss types.
I don't have to put label on it, but I mean, but clearly, any VC community, we know, in general, VC communities, they're set up and driven by the numbers. No surprise there. And so, that's not to say that, the people in that committee, I've worked in it for, I've been involved with it for many years, and they're, not to say people are heartless at all. And they do think about the societal impact and so forth. But in the end,
what makes the money?
It's purely a financial investment, then, unless that's going to impact on the value of your investment, then, it's sort of someone else's problem.
Is that then probably that could be the final discussion, I suppose? Like, is that where regulation could come in quite handy, do you reckon? Because obviously there's a lot of debate about regulation. What does that look like, and etc. But should regulation be in the form of, so it's not about in the form of sort of, hitting the companies with the stick, say, okay, you can't do that. But rather say, okay, if we want as a government, we want AI that solves problems. Here's the fund, right? And you need to follow these rules to make sure that you follow, that you don't build robots that step over homeless people on the streets, but perhaps AI that helps people, get new jobs or courses like what Finland they've done. The government funded courses so that their general population can learn learn just the basics of AI for free, as an example. I mean, could that be part of the regulation, do you think?
I think it could. I mean, regulations, always got to be very careful with regulation. Obviously too much you can stifle,
Innovation.
it too much. I'm a firm believer of, more carrot-listic, and so.
Incentives, for example.
So it's incentives, and the X Prize was a great example of how you could incentivize, innovation, if you like, Spaceship One and that kind of stuff. The X, and the stuff that can be done. I mean, and I'm not necessarily suggesting it's that kind of, exactly that approach, but I do think we should incentivize companies, and the innovations we want inside society, and incentivize less the ones that we don't. Now, we're a little careful there, because if you're not careful, as political, fortunes, wax and wane, then it's not a sustainable environment, because those things have to be through for more than a year or 2 or 4 years or one parliament. Otherwise, the time frame is too short. So there are challenges with that approach, obviously, because typically political timeframes are shorter than some of those runways, if you like. So, but I think it's a mix. There's definitely regulation in terms of protecting people's data and so for what you can and can't do with it, and that sort of stuff. And I think the AI regulations is only in its infancy, if you like, in terms of what we should and shouldn't do. But then I think there's also, almost back to the discussion about, how do we ensure that we have a thriving, tech communities inside the UK is to provide, the frameworks where, if you like, tech for good gets more advantages than tech for bad, if you like, a very simplistic level. I'm not saying I have the answers to actually how you structure that thing, because it's probably not easy at all. But it does seem that some collection of those things together is what you want to try and ensure you have the result you want.
So what do you think is the future of AI moving forward? Because obviously, I mean, firstly, do you think that are we towards the end now of the Gen AI hype? If not, when will it end, and what's the future?
I think there's always, because we're still early in the eventual capability of Gen AI, I think there's always going to be a hype cycle, if you like, that's kind of being led by that science breaking frontier, if you like. I don't see that stopping anytime soon, because I don't think we're there by a long way. Although, you could argue that, well, you can't really 10x the compute requirements of the current models, because it's like, no one's going to invest that. So it's possible that will curtail the top bit. I think, there's bound to be a little fallout from that as well, because suddenly all this stuff, not all this stuff appeared, and then we'll see the real AI curve, which is it being imbued and augmented into enterprises, broadly in an increasing level, and that's just going to become business as usual in terms of, well, of course you do that stuff. I think we will, because there's still breakthroughs to come. We're going to continue to see some of that hype curve, but I think it will. I think we will see the shine. We're already seeing the shine starting to come off a little bit. A bunch of most of that money that's been pumped into startup companies will go bad. Because it can't
will vanish.
All be true. It's just not. It's like the hardest, thing I went through at the very start of my career. It can't all be true. In most of it can't, and more so, most of it can't be true, because there's just not. There's not enough. There won't be enough for all those people to compete for. So, that's going to hurt a lot of VC companies because the size of investment is huge that they put in.
It's unprecedented, yeah. I mean, that's why that's what worries me, because if that happens, I mean, like the this is going to be probably the worst bubble explosion in the world of tech ever. Maybe in the business even. Like
higher they fly, harder they fall, whatever the expression is. But it will be those companies that are concentrating on the practical use of this technology whilst understanding the place of research, I think. That's why I'm so excited to be at IBM, because I think IBM do understand that balance. And that's how that's the state we evolve to, in terms of actually how you use this in reality to actually gain that ROI for customers, which is to get off, the massive hype curve and actually go practical, if you like.
So so you're saying that effectively it's kind of going back to pretty much where AI has been pretty much for the past, well, like from my journey as an entrepreneur for at least 20 years, but certainly even before that, which is more of a back-end operational technology. That is actually quite helpful. It's important, etc. But what about the consumer side? Because it seems right now,
and that's interesting because I spend my time more in the enterprise space than the consumer space.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of scope in the consumer space where, good enough is different than good enough in enterprise. It means different things if you're in the consumer space and your enterprise space. And I think in the consumer space, there is more opportunity, I think, for larger AI models to interact, if you like, and do stuff on behalf of consumers. The question is still going to be the ROI of that. If those things are expensive to run, then what's the ROI? And they can run for a bit, but unless, most consumer information technology is advertiser sponsored. So what does that mean? In the case of running a large AI model, is that advertising sponsored? I'm going to make this up now. Does advertising kind of slowly creep into the responses somehow? And, in a way that, US TV used to say, and use this washing powder.
Exactly. I was about to say, it's use this product. Like, based on your question, you might need to use this instead of that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, that's, but it's going to be the ROI problem. If that's really going to be entrenched, then what's the ROI? And so, and if it's creating a new thing that wasn't available before, then is that monetizable? Is the consumer paying for it, or is it free? If it's free, then what's paying for it? If it's enabling an enterprise to be better at handling consumers, more efficient, okay, you can make the ROI for that. And so it'll vary, and so, but it's interesting because because that's the point. Almost none of the things we just talked about in the last few minutes are solved. So, and we don't know how that's going to work, which is, I think, is exactly the problem. Is that it's not clear how that stuff's going to be monetized.
Well, be interesting for me. Yeah, I actually, because you probably saw that me doing this on LinkedIn. That back in January this year, because I'm a big believer, as you probably know, on edge AI. Because I think actually the practical side of it, in terms of maybe not necessarily ROI, but what is the cheaper way of bringing AI to the masses, and that's on device edge AI.
Because then because they're paying for it, basically.
Exactly.
Exactly, they're paying it. It's their hardware. They're paying for it.
And Apple, I think they probably got this right. I mean, again, we need to get our hands on that and test it, etc. But from the announcements, I just interested to see your point of view as well. But like from their announcement with what they call Apple Intelligence, they had to change stuff, didn't they?
But I do think that it's interesting because I do think I don't know whether that's the driving force, but certainly you can see how that can help get around the ROI problem because
you pay for the device if that's where the money is.
If you can build a model like this and then not have to pay to run it, you, the person who created it, don't have to pay to run it. The person using it does on their device, then that helps get then that changes the ROI dynamics. And I guess a future discussion might be, can that happen in the enterprise space or not? Can that affect the ROI of running these models in the enterprise space or not? Or not? And so, not if it's all back-ended done, because the enterprise is definitely paying for that, or in the cloud somewhere, or whatever. But
so, do you think Apple's model could be that disruptive? They could even disrupt the enterprise.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. But I think, but it's a really interesting approach to get around the ROI problem.
Indeed,
which is, I really don't know whether that was the driving force or the fact that they're consumer oriented anyway meant that was the only answer. I don't know, how it came about, but I think that is an interesting aspect of what they're doing, which is how do we offload effectively the processing to the user's device, whoever that user happens to be. And so you are paying for it, just that it may be sunk cost as opposed to,
It's the business people also
I'm
use
sure
that.
I'm sure there's no automotive at all on that. I'm sure, no, I won't hear of it. I'm sure about, not in the slightest, no.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's fascinating. No, but I think definitely, I think this message is like, it's how to solve the ROI problem. I think
I spend a lot of my time thinking about that, because essentially, once all the hype stuff's over, would it be successful? It depends on the ROI of production. Full stop. That's it. Otherwise, it won't work. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely a perfect note to end on, like as advice for everybody. I mean, like whether you're a tech entrepreneur, a project manager, or an enterprise, like don't follow the hype. It's about the ROI. Who pays for it? Who benefits? I mean, it's a very simple equation. It sounds so simple, but nobody's talking about it. So, but anyway, Henry.
That was 2 hours conversation. Look at that.
I know. I mean, I think we could go on forever. I mean, that's the thing with AI. It's an endless conversation. That's why I think it's important to have that. Like you said earlier, I think
it is. I know.
We need to have that kind of conversation publicly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Look, fantastic. Great conversation. Glad we did this.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate that. Well, my friends, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before I go away, if you are on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. It really makes a massive difference for the growth of our channel. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you need to give us a star review. Apparently, your following means nothing unless you give us a star review. Don't ask me why, but give us whatever star review that you think is fair. And if you're not following us, what are you doing? Come on, man. It doesn't cost you anything. It really makes a big difference. I really, really appreciate your support. But also, if you've got cash to spare, consider to become a founding member. We are an independent medium. We're not reliant on any kind of company that gets money from Russian oligarchs or any kind of weird sponsorships or anything like that. All of the companies that work with us are genuine companies that I know and I like. But ultimately, it's the members, you guys, our subscribers, our followers, our founding members, or those of you who actually just donated us like $1 here, a couple of bucks there, $5 there. All of that makes a big difference. This is what makes us truly independent. We're not chasing clickbait because we don't want clickbait. We want facts. We want the truth. We want something that we can all aspire to and something that truly make us at least work harder to make the world a better place. Not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. And of course, it supports all of our campaigns as well. So my friends, thank you so much. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
You are listening